Gene, I know much of what was announced yesterday did not live up to your expectations. How so?
Well, Emily, I think there's three different pockets here. I just want to be clear about each of them. There's the timing of Model Y, and I incorrectly published something and later published a correction on this, that we're going to be late at getting the Model Y out. In fact, at going over the transcripts, Elon Musk has always said that they would have the Model Y out sometime late in 2020 next year. And so I just want to be clear, that piece was on track despite my mistake. The second piece, the actual car itself, I think that actually did exactly in line with my expectations. All of the specs, the price point. One piece that gets missed in this whole thing is that the price point really is a surprise when you compare it to other SUVs and crossovers, basically half of what they cost. So this is a $39,000. If you look at the e-tron, the I-Pace, Mercedes crossover at electric versions, they're all right around $70,000. So that was spot in line. The one piece that was a change from us, and just to be clear on this, is that we now feel that there is a greater chance that they will raise money in 2019. I think that the street is generally accepting, generally of the belief that they will, in fact, need to raise money. Part of the reason is this loss in the first quarter that they've already talked about. Another part is some of the logistics challenges that they've had in getting cars to Europe and China. That impacts kind of the cash flow. And they obviously have this $566 million debt payment coming up in the month of November. And so, Emily, it is kind of a mixed bag here, but I want to just backtrack, clear up some of my own mistakes, and give people a good snapshot of what happened yesterday.
Well, thank you, Gene, for being straight up about that. I want to talk about what the street is thinking. I've got a chart in the Bloomberg showing the number of weeks of sell-offs, the number of weeks of gains, and so far in 2019, as you can see on the far right side, there's more red than green. So how concerned are you about the cash position and about the manufacturing issues that Musk spent so much time talking about?
Well, it's a concern because this is a company that is ramping several cars, Model 3, Model Y. They've talked about their challenges in manufacturing. They've been open about that. So it's naturally a concern for me. But I think that when I put that in a context and put the probability, the higher probability that they raise money this year, and I believe that that would be potentially negative for the stock in the near term. But ultimately, the concern about raising money and the concern around production, I think, is a near term. And I would quantify that as kind of a 1 or 2 year phase of this investment. And the good news for Tesla, and this is the reason why we still believe in this story, is that this curve going from gas to electric is going to be so dramatic over the next decade. We're going from 1% to eventually it will be 100%. I think that Tesla will survive and prosper in this. And so the simple take is this is quite a roller coaster. It will continue to be a roller coaster in 2019, but I think investors who have a longer term focus should continue to believe in this.
Now, I'm curious about your thoughts on another story, the Apple-Spotify dispute. Apple has released its response to Spotify's antitrust complaint. You know, all of this happening in the context of U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren making this argument that tech companies, including Apple, are due for a breakup and have too much power. You know, how does that play into this Spotify-Apple issue? And who do you think is in the right?
So I think Apple's in the right. I think Elizabeth Warren is not in the right. Probably not a surprise to hear me say that because I'm generally believe in tech. I don't think tech should be broken up. But I understand the basic concept of some when tech gets too much power. But I think in Apple's case, one thing that's important about the App Store, and Spotify participates in that, is Apple doesn't really make any revenue from their apps that are available in the App Store. It's just a handful. I mean, they make some revenue if you look at, for example, Apple Music. But for the most part, this is really small.
And that's really what Spotify is talking about here. I mean, Spotify says that Apple claims that Apple got more hostile after it released its own competing music product.
Well, I think there's the Spotify and the competitive issue with Apple, and Apple is free to continue to use its own platform, I think, to its own good. I don't consider that anti-competitive when you look at the market share being globally in terms of smartphones at, call it 18%. I think it's a hard claim. This is very different than Microsoft with Internet Explorer back 15, 20 years ago. So I understand why they would be upset. Spotify would be upset at the music, but I think that if you look at the platform, what's more important is the platform overall. And I think the platform overall is almost entirely for the good of getting apps out there, and Apple takes their cut of it.
What about this Apple Qualcomm, developing situation where a judge has now ruled in Qualcomm's favor, and there are still ongoing suits around the world between Apple and Qualcomm, but in this particular case today, the ruling favored Qualcomm.
So this has been a war of words. It's been a legal war too. Big judgments, lots of appeals on those judgments, and hard to say how much money has actually changed hands through all this. I think the simple takeaway is this: is the language is very strong between the two companies. There is no love lost here. But ultimately, I think Apple will find a way to work with Qualcomm on the next 5G radio chip. But down the road, Apple is going to want to do exactly what they did with the A4 chips and their whole A series of chips when they purchased PA Semi. I think they're going to want to vertically integrate this. And so from my perspective, there may be a few $1 billion changed hands here. It's really largely a rounding error. But what's more important is that this is giving Apple even more confidence and motivation to vertically integrate around a competitive Qualcomm chip.